Good morning. Welcome to Carb Sober Sunday, and I am ready to answer questions and talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, which I have termed carb sobriety because I'm not a fan of the term food addict, and there's groups called Food Addicts Anonymous. Um, you know, it's really clear that anything that's been binged on, overeaten, and indulged in has been basically sugars, grains, processed food, we'll say carbs. I could binge on Chinese pork fried rice. I could binge on mashed potatoes. So we're talking about foods that now clearly my favored drug of choice was for me, I think more of a sugar addiction than it was chips, but I actually had it all. I suffered severely with, we'll just call it carb addiction. And I was just talking about this in my group yesterday, that because we do a lot of different things in the group aside from the meetings that I hold live 3 or 4 times a week. We've also added 2 more additional different types of meetings specifically to help support and help overcome the whatever your DOC, your drug of choice, is in addiction. And it could be a cross addiction of red wine and sweets and chocolate and binge watching excessively Netflix series. I mean, these are all different types, whether it's a process addiction or a physical addiction. Because, we can transfer addict, cross addict onto many things. But when we go to talking about the food, one of these extra groups that we're doing, 2 of them that are going to just put more tools in the tool belt for those who are really struggling with staying out of the ditch and doing great and feeling the positive effects, but ending up, even though you know better, face down in the garbage food. And what I was getting at with labeling this, and the reason why I like to refer to it as carb sober behavior is, as I described, I was never at a point for all those times I would get in the car and go drive to get my DOC, whether it was usually it was a combination of stops of different places of getting my favorites. But never was it to grab my keys, get in the car, and drive to get ribeye and ground beef, to come home and sit in front of the TV and have at it. Never. It was so, to call it a food addiction, people will come back at that and say, can't possibly have a food addiction. Everybody needs to eat. That's a ridiculous kind of term. And so when I just term it carb addiction, I know many out there call it sugar addiction. Why? Because as soon as you eat a potato chip or mashed potatoes or rice, those starches in those carbs, as you chew, the amylase enzyme in your saliva immediately starts breaking it down. And what does it break it down into? Components of sugars. So when people say, if somebody says, "Oh, I have a sugar addiction," and then somebody says, "Oh, I don't have a sweet tooth," and meanwhile they're obese and diabetic, but they have let's call it the savory side of chips, crackers, bread, pizza, pasta, rice. that's not sweets, right? And they say, I don't have a sweet tooth, I don't have a sugar addiction, but realistically, it is also a sugar addiction. But for me to be more inclusive and to get more people to understand the seriousness of this is by calling it carb addiction and carb sobriety, because it's anything and everything that you don't have sober behavior around. Um, I could even say, and I don't know, think back to your past and anything and everything that has happened in your disordered relationship with food. And I can even remember having, if any of you have had kids, well, it doesn't have to be with kids, but it was that bag you get in the produce section at the store that had those baby carrots. And dang, if I couldn't plow through a large amount of those, why? There's a portion of sweetness to carrots. And for somebody, evidently me, high on the spectrum of this disordered relationship with food, carbs, it affects me. And it wasn't a thought back then that carrots are healthy, right? I know people, we've had discussions in my group about this, who could binge on Brussels sprouts. Now, of course, the Brussels sprouts were typically in bacon and olive oil and roasted and caramelized, so it gets that brown, crusty, crisp edges on them, right? Well, when it's browning, it's caramelizing, just like onions. And that's why I stay away from fresh onions. People say, well, can't you at least have onions and garlic on this? Like, what are we doing here? Where's the pleasure in life? I'm like, well, there's no pleasure to me when I get triggered. And if I have caramelized onions cooking in that pan, and then I add in the ground beef and potentially, let's say, stewed tomatoes, or make it into a chili, this girl is now eating past satiety. This is firing me up to keep eating it, because the taste sensations of and that little twinge of sweetness, even though you don't think of chili as sweet, but compare it to plain ground beef or ground beef just slightly salted, and compare the flavor taste profile of chili compared to that. And you'll start understanding what I'm talking about and why it is not restrictive for me to not eat those things. It's very freeing to know that I'm not putting anything in my mouth that is causing ongoing cravings. And so I will, you know, uh, when I talk about overcoming this, I really, and I get choked up a lot because I'm sure I say it at least in one video, because there's always something that is so important to me, to get people to understand that there is a way out of this and there is a way to stop this. It's not easy. It's going to be the hardest thing you'll ever do. And for those of you who are able to flip the switch and just jump into carnivore and heal whatever health issue you had and say, well, heck, why would I ever go back to that food? This is great. More power to you. That's awesome. You are not high on the spectrum of the lack of control and disordered relationship with food that I've been. This typically starts way young. And I laugh and joke that this probably started when I received an easy bake oven for my birthday, probably at 6 or 7 years old. And, my parents didn't know then. And actually, for me, as a young mom raising my little kids, I didn't understand um, the whole realm of this sugar addiction and carb addiction. Although I was well into my disordered eating, it didn't seem like anybody else around me was. And then also remember, you don't know what people do behind closed doors. And so as alone as you feel in this, and addictions love isolation, and but remember, this is not this is not an unusual thing. When I look around, especially when I go into a grocery store and I peer into people's carts because I can't help it, just out of boredom, maybe standing online. But I think, wow, yep, they're in it too. They got it. They just don't know it yet. They won't know it until they have a severe enough health issue that they dig real deep online to get this grassroots effort that many of us are out here spending so much time and energy and our own money on to really help, just passionately help, want to get the word out for people to understand that this is serious and this is a slow suicide. And so let me get back to, because if you've been with me for any amount of time, I certainly can go off on tangents. I was starting with saying about the 2 extra tools in the toolbox that I am doing in the membership group to help those who say, I can barely get through 2 days, let alone 2 months or celebrate my 1-year carniversary. And so we've done, so there's 2 programs that pretty much most people know about. One is called Smart Recovery, and another is the 12-step program. But in my mind, and I don't want to get too far into this, and you could say, well, OA is the 12-step program for disordered eaters or overeaters, right? But in having discussions within my group and discussions with many who have been through 12-step programs for other addictions and were very successful, they pretty much blatantly outright say there is really no 12-step program for pure carb sobriety. It's and some of those 12-step programs that are for food related issues like Sugar and Carb Addicts Anonymous, SCAA, and there's FAA, Food Addicts Anonymous, and there's FA, and then there's OA, and then there's Gray Sheeters, and then there's OA How. And I was trying to sift through all of these because I am just eager to explore every possible way to help people out of this. And, one way might work beautifully for one, like just saying, you got to go carnivore. And that person might have had severe enough health issues that possibly pretty quickly presented healing with a short amount of carnivore time that 100% motivated them to say, I am not going to touch that other toxic stuff ever again. And for some people, that's all you need. For others, and I'll say for myself, I had been, prior to coming into that night of intense internet surfing, trying to continue to find an answer to this and finding that zeroing in on health group. Prior to that, you all know there's all sorts of diet plans, and the only things that were coming close to giving me a thought that there might be a light at the end of the tunnel were Atkins, paleo. There was a Schwarzbein principle, which was basically similar to Vinnie Tortorich's no sugar, no grains, because it was basically, no sugar, no grains was the premise. And I saw such great, I read the book and I was like, all right, no sugar, no grains. And I'm out with my family and I'm not ordering toast with my omelet anymore or potatoes. And I'm not getting my toasted bagel. And it was hard. And I was avoiding sugars, but I was, I could binge on the baby carrots, or I could, at the time, fruit, of course, fruit's paleo, it's natural to earth. Of course, why would you eliminate fruit? Fruit's healthy, right? Got to eat your fruits and vegetables. I could binge on an entire bag of dried apricots. That's like candy, right? So it was stepwise for me, but I could do so well and then I could fall back in it. And unfortunately for me, um, I didn't have a physical, oh gosh, here is what happens when you fall back in that ditch. No, I would start dabbling. I was like, oh, it's all right. And then I dabble more. Next thing you know, I'm down the slippery slope. And then I'm just relishing being back in the trough, and makes it really hard to get back out. Um, but, if I had, you know, I feel people are fortunate if they have an instant repercussion of a ditch dive. Um, so I'm not really, and you know what? I have to take this back as far as those people are lucky, because I'm going to tell you there are people, and I have some right now in my group who have some serious health issues and know 100% that this is what they need and have to do. Diagnosis of cancer and some other inflammatory issues and autoimmune issues. And the most they've ever gotten under their belt was 6 months once, pretty long ago. And now it's like every other week they're back in it. And this is, I mean, we have to really think, how serious is this? Is this like, it's like, of course we don't have a death wish. We're not just, trying to kill ourselves. We're stressed out from medical diagnosis, and we're understanding. And even if it's simple things like acne that shows up or some gut bloating, things are going wrong in your body with what you are ditch diving to, right? And I think that just understanding the severity of this and understanding how difficult it is to get out of your own way with this, take a deep breath, step back, and think to yourself, how am I moving forward? Um, I have different things that I really swear by as far as helping me, and even helping me in my ongoing battle with this. And I'm very quick to um, tell you that, because people say, "Oh my God, this is so depressing to think you're 16." Yeah, I'm about 2 weeks away from my 16-year carniversary, and you're still struggling. And I'm like, nah, I'm not struggling. I'm battling it because it's always there. It's a very ingrained thing from childhood of how I was consoled, or how I comforted myself, or how I filled lonely emotional voids. I'm not really sure, because I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist. All I can say is that from so many years of being very deep into a what I call carb addiction, that doesn't just disappear. And I could say, as wonderful as things are, having health, it still doesn't change my what I call the ditch demon in there, the noise that happens if I am somewhere and there's a huge bowl of mixed nuts, that my brain doesn't go, oh, look at those cashews. I would have that one. Oh, wow. The macadamias, there's a lot of them, and one of them's a little bit brown, and I like them because they're a little bit firmer and crunchier. And this is what happens in Lisa's brain. I battle that, even though I could say, not my food. That serves me no purpose. And I get it, all those things. I'm just saying this inner struggle that I now call it just a battle, that we all have to be, well, I say we all, because I'm just lumping you all into my world of dealing with being in a world where there's so many triggers, there's so many delectable, delicious foods that people are enjoying and laughing and offering and pushing and serving. And it's fun and it's party and it's where are we going? What are we eating? What are we having? What are you bringing? And food, food, food. And you could just scream, because I need to stay in my safe bubble. I need to stay, for the most part, in a safe bubble where I have my ground beef and my New York strips and my ribeyes and my oxtail and some pork belly and my eggs and some salmon and shrimp and scallops. What am I naming here? I'm naming foods that I have sober behavior around. And fortunately, oh, I forgot lamb and lamb chops. Love them. But these are foods that I have sober behavior around. These are foods that are thankfully nutrient dense, nutritious, and delicious. And I don't have to feel like I am, oh, I don't have to feel like I'm suffering or that I'm making myself miserable or that this is just too boring. And I'm just throwing out all of these comments from people who are fully in their addiction and don't want to give it up or don't want to think for a moment that this is actually the path to them healing and resolving their disordered relationship with food, because many people don't even think they have a disordered relationship with food. And I believe from all of my years of doing this and coaching and having my groups is that, down here at the lower end where somebody might be able to have some dark chocolate and some nuts and then not touch it for a couple days, but then it's calling to them and then they go back to it, right? That's pretty mild. Me, I need to finish the chocolate and the nuts that night so that I say, whew, at least I got that out of the way. I won't have to deal with that struggle tomorrow. Let's just finish it, right? And I say this with a tone of comedy, but I'll say it's also with significant tears and feeling despondent and humiliated at feeling so out of control over something that I so badly wanted to fix. And gosh, I know I've kind of just did my thing over here and I have not addressed you all here in the chat. Thank you so much for joining in. Yeah, my, I'm just reading some of these comments. You guys are great. I love having you join in. I hope that these talks are beneficial because for me, the loneliness and isolation I felt trying to deal with this was horrible. And even if I could just bring a group of you together each Sunday to join me and talk about this. And then I will segue one step further. And this is why I spend so much time and energy and money hosting a group that I meet live with 3-4 times a week. Why? Because then you're in a room with me and you ask questions and you talk. And sometimes I call on you just to have you hear for yourself what's going on and that we can contribute and say, oh my God, I can so relate to that. And this is what I did. This is what I did to help with that. And you're communicating. And, I say that's really top of my list for healing yourself and resolving yourself from this plight that you've been dealt in life. And again, I'm just pulling you all in. Maybe some of you out there can moderate. Maybe you have a different perspective and you just come watch my channel because I'm carnivore for a long time. And I've put up some really awesome, in my opinion, carnivore recipe videos that have become favorites of some. And I know I really need to do, I don't want to say, I'm going to write a book, but it's not going to be a cookbook. It's not going to be, although I'm thinking my book is going to have a section of it that's going to be my all-time favorite recipes that helped get me into carnivore and helped me, feed my family healthier. But the bottom line for me now, which is why I really don't feel I'll ever do a full outright cookbook, is I, at my severity of carb addiction, do the best with just grilling, broiling, frying, slow cooking meat and putting it on the plate and eating it. And when I start in on all those other things, although they were extremely helpful at the beginning, and I don't want anybody for a second here to think that I'm not full on into carnivore recipes, because oh my gosh, that carnivore pizza, the one that finally became the be all end all awesome carnivore pizza recipe, it's great. And if I have guests or family or friends, those kind of things are amazing. My meaty muffins are just, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but just fabulous. And you can vary it with whatever, leftover meats you have, and you can freeze it and you can just pull it out from frozen and go on errands and have a quick meal. And there's reasons and places for that. But I always like to still express the fact that I really do so well on, I call it lion adjacent. Lion diet serves a huge purpose, and for some is really necessary at times. But lion adjacent, I've found, and I just call it lion adjacent, whatever we want to call it. It's really goes now then to my sober circles, the green, the yellow, the red. And if you haven't heard about that or know about that, go watch my Sober Circles YouTube video. And I don't think it's actually called Sober Circles I think you could find, I'll link the Sober Circles here. But what I'm basically saying is, what is in your green circle as far as what your day-to-day food plan should be? You need to really think hard of what foods you have sober behavior around, and think hard about getting rid of the rest of it, or keeping it in the yellow circle and having a parameter around it. And so, I'm totally safe with eggs. I don't binge on eggs. Beef, I don't binge on ribeye, although sometimes, because I'm a volume eater, I will eat more than I probably absolutely eat more than I calorically need, or energy-wise need, because it's delicious and I have a lifelong history of volume eating. But I don't binge on it in a very deleterious way, let's say. But so meats, seafood, I don't binge on shrimp. I don't binge on scallops, although I can eat a good pound and a half of them at a sitting with some butter. And then, of course, you plop in a little heavy cream, a little grated Parmesan as you're cooking it, and we're off to the races, because then I will definitely eat more than if I just had some plain scallops. So think long and hard about, again, these preparations and where you're at on the spectrum of this. And think about just maybe at the beginning, limiting. I like to use the word limiting instead of restricting. Limiting yourself to foods in your green circle. These are foods that you really have thought about, that you have total sober behavior around. Bacon for me is not in the green circle, because I will continue to eat bacon as long as there's pretty much bacon on the plate. Now, that's an exaggeration, but if I make a pound of bacon and I'm making some eggs and I'm really making extra bacon to put in the fridge for later snacks, and this is my personal experience, but I end up pretty much plowing through the bacon. It shrinks up so small, right, guys? It's tiny and it's crunchy and it's salty. And we could get into the whole thing with salt too, which will cause us typically to eat about 11% more than if it was unsalted. And there's actually PubMed scientific documents about the addictive quality of salt. But I'm not going to go off on that tangent, because I'm going to guess, maybe did I even do a whole YouTube video on it? I don't know. I don't remember anymore. But I will say that for sure, understanding what foods so bacon's in the yellow zone for me. I have it when I'm at restaurants on burgers. I have it at restaurants if they will substitute. I will often ask if I'm not getting, of course, the veggies, the potato, the salad, or the soup, or the bread. Sometimes the waiters are persistent when I've said, no, 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 no. Just they'll say, well, can I get you something else? Like I could get you, a lot of times they'll go, I can get you some fruit. I'm like, no. But I say, you know what? If there's any bacon back there that's grilled and not deep fried, that would be great if you could throw that on my plate with the meat. I'd be so happy. And you'd be surprised how many times people have done that. Less often with shrimp, but I've had that happen too. Well, they'll put a little shrimp on instead of. Sometimes they're very diligent about wanting to make you happy. So I don't know where I've gone with all this. I think I've gone in a big circle, and I've probably been off on a big tangent. But this is the type of discussion I have live in my meetings, where I then have interaction with you all, and it was one of my only. It was the most important thing for me getting out of my disordered relationship with food and my misery of my lifelong kind of secretive life with a binging. And so that's why I'm really strongly suggesting anybody who is group averse or just can't picture what that would be like, get in a group. It doesn't have to be my group. I'm not here to promote myself. I'm here to promote your health and your future happiness. And, we all want quality of life going forward. And without our health, we really will have nothing. And so you got to fix it now. And, I'm diligent about this conversation, and I do call this Carb Sober Sunday. But just remember, and if you've been watching me in the past, like pretty much year now. I mean, I've been out in social media. I think this is 5 years for me. But as of the past year, I've really dove deep into junk light and saying that junk food doesn't belong in our mouth and junk light doesn't belong in our eyes or on our skin. And so everything that I really have learned on my lifelong journey here to optimal health, I have in sections in the member group where if you have questions about cancer and cancer recovery, or cholesterol and your doctor's freaked out by your numbers, or whatever it is, I have all of my from my years and years of populating lists of why on a low carb, keto, carnivore-ish way of eating would my cholesterol be higher, or my triglycerides, or my LDL, all of these different topics. And why is it actually healthier for me if I have a higher LDL? And a lower LDL is a higher death rate. And all of these messages need to come out. But you also, I know, are barraged by people, and a lot of loving, well-meaning people who are truly concerned about me, you, eating this crazy way. And it's important that you educate yourself, and not that we have to defend ourselves, and not that we owe anybody an explanation, because there are simple ways of dealing with that. And I have a YouTube video called something about naysayers. I think there's a big naysayers, what to tell the naysayers video that I think is really powerful to watch and get a vocabulary of dialogues of what you're going to reply that will help you feel more comfortable when you are, and I will say, verbally attacked by people who are like, what do you mean you don't eat vegetables and fruits and fiber? Are you kidding me? Have you had a colonoscopy? Oh, well, that's a whole nother topic. No, no, I will never get one of those either. So, I could go on, but, I will stop here and, thank you all for joining in. I really hope that, I'm over here reading in the comments a little bit just so I can see. Some of these are funny. Lioness Lou says, this is when I was talking about my carb addiction started when I got my Easy Bake Oven. Started for her in her mom's womb, likely in past lives too. And that could very well be. Um, I and I feel for it was I feel really empowered to talk about this because of how secretive it's been. And as a kid, you just ride your bike to the candy store and you come home with Jolly Ranchers and Pixie Sticks and Bazooka and you name it, but you don't think anything of it. Uh, yeah, and so thank you all for joining. I'm going to I'm going to actually end this Carb Sober Sunday now because I I really want to put this up, and this is really kind of strange because I just did this totally off the cuff like I do. The members in my group call it the Lisa monologue that I start off the meetings with. And, oh, Dieter. So Dieter just popped up in the chat. Um, Dieter was actually a gentleman who attended my very first Northeast meetup. That it was when coming right out of the quarantine, and I just decided to say, "Hey, who wants to meet me?" And I was gonna have it at a restaurant, but of course you could only eat outside. And then I said, "Well, what if it rains?" And I said, "Well, I might as well just have it right here in my condo." And I had 8 people join me that day. And so, Dieter, there is a meetup in New Jersey. We actually just had one in January. I think it was like January 25th or 26th. There's a group that meets, I'm going to say maybe every other month. And the next one is March, I think 23rd. But Dieter, send me a message and I will get you the contact information of the day and the time. And you show up and it's one of those, Brazilian kind of all you can eat meat places, not the big chain ones, but it's really good. So yeah, that would be great if you could start jumping in on those. All right, so I'm going to jump off here because I am so wanting to get this message out instead of just putting this up as a Carb Sober Sunday. I will make a thumbnail that's going to express that this is encouragement to overcome your disordered relationship with food and carb addiction. And oh, great, Dieter, you're going to come. I'll get me your email, and I will send you the information. All right. Have a great day. I hope to see you next Sunday at the Carb Sober Sunday. And I'm going to put the link, of course, I always do, to my member group, and I'd love to see you there. Hit the thumbs up, hit the like, I don't know, whatever you're supposed to do. Spread the word, send this to somebody who might find it helpful, and we'll see you next time.